Okay, so fantastic. Sorry about the nitty-gritty as we get going. It's fairly inevitable. I've been doing Zoom for the last year, and every single day, and even now, it still causes occasion to pull one's hair out, what's left of it. So I guess what I'd ask you, if you just go to mute as we go through it, but if you've got any questions or any sort of comments or insight, then jump in with those now, or we can circle back at the end. This is not a particularly long presentation. There's a couple of case studies which are a little bit more kind of detailed perhaps towards the end, but as it is, it's not a long one, and we can discuss as we go, or if you have any questions, that's absolutely fine. So let's move across here. See if that actually loads. Right, we've got that page, done that one. Okay, so as I was saying, we've got three parts to this part of the course effectively. This is where we'll be looking around trends and forecasting, and effectively how to leverage them to create a really strong initial idea for a project or a concept. And the second part will be moving across to translate some of those insights into design narrative and user experience. And then we'll move on finally to put some of those into practice into some very simple potential layouts for vehicles, just to understand the process of moving trends across to building an experience across to the translation of that into a potential vehicle. So that's going to be the overarching outline of what we're looking at in this course. And I would say just briefly on this one, that a lot of designers, I have quite a lot of experience in mentoring, certainly postgrad and undergraduate students in this field. And it's the same in industry as well. You can get very, very deep into an idea, but often the balance between the importance of the research and why you're doing it tends to get lost in the kind of enjoyment of rendering an idea and building a sexy model and how fantastic this 3D thing looks, and the idea behind it, the initial gestation of that research, gets kind of lost, and it doesn't matter, it's just a cool looking vehicle. So this is focused on that front end of the process, and we'll give you some tools to build a really stronger structure under your initial design concept. Okay. So where does it fit into the overall process? This is by no means, the definitive design process slide here. This is just something that I use myself. It's simple enough just to show the initial work streams that we're going to be working around and how they feed into then what becomes the main sort of meat of the design work in terms of sketching, design development, rendering, modeling, etc., etc. So this is really front-end design process. Okay, so trends and forecasting. The subtitle for this is really tools to build a stronger concept. And if we take a look at the landscape of what you're dealing with as a designer or someone involved in the automotive or transportation design field, the designer skill set has become far broader than it was, say, 10 or 15 years ago. There are a number of reasons for this, one of which is the much larger cohort of graduates that come from new design schools, ours included, I'm afraid. There used to be 6 or 7. You had Art Centre, CTS, Coventry, RCA, Strat, UMEA, maybe Fortime as well. And now there are many, many more times that, from India across to Korea and China, etc. So there's a huge supply glut of designers. So any way you can differentiate yourself and make yourself stand out is a bonus, is a plus, is really a necessity. The second reason for that skill set requirement being much broader is that really the mobility landscape has changed and is undergoing a massive change at the moment. Again, 15 years ago, the default internal combustion engine car, and the conventional segments that we all understood, A, B, C, D, you know, E, F, S, those kind of things, are much more fluid now, and they're being blurred all the time by these agile innovators that are coming on the market. There's plenty in the west coast of the US, but also across China and some in Europe. And they are disrupting the market. So this traditional approach to designing a car is seen as somewhat old-fashioned now. And, you know, you can't graduate from university or get into a studio with a folio full of, you know, regular sports cars. It's, unless you're going for a very specific job, but, you know, you need to have a broader set of skills. And finally, just to finish up on this, really, is that there's a much clearer focus now on user experience, UX, user-centric design. Many reasons for that. Perhaps the strongest might be the ubiquitous nature of social media and our own personal devices. But, you know, there's no getting away from that we have a different take, a different perspective on personal design, really. And that's blurred and moved its way into the mobility world, as you know, from the obvious things like touchscreens, etc., etc. So it's a very different landscape to how a traditional designer might have left university with his suitcase full of the design skills 10 or 15 years ago. And so you need to show insight. You need to have your own ideas about how mobility is evolving. And you also need to have some kind of empathy towards the user, you know, what their hopes, fears, challenges are in the future, because that way you can get inside the customer, the end user's head a little bit and understand what their aspirations are, what their motivations are, and what excites them. Okay, so there's a number of things we're touching on there that I'll go into a little bit more detail on now. And they all, understanding them and working through them in a project, help you understand and develop a concept that's really convincing and generally more viable. Okay, so what is strategic design? Effectively, you know, this is the definition from dictionary essentially, but it's the intersection between what is of value to customers and end users, which is the section on the right, and what's profitable for a business, which is a section on the left here. So that crossover is really where the strategy of design is highlighted. It allows us to define clearly who that end user, the target customer is, and how we can give them value through design. That's really what the purpose of it, the function, the tool, and why we use it. And so for this part of the course, we're not going to focus so much on this element of profitability, because from my perspective, that's much more distinct around different companies, their own philosophies, their own brand values, the local marketing or markets that they are embedded in. And that's quite a kind of, you know, individual kind of case basis. What we'll be looking at in more detail are the tangible benefits around research and the insights that we can gain from that research. Okay, so initially, when we start to understand trends and forecasting, and this obviously links to the user and the customer, we have to cast our net wide, and we're doing Car Design Academy here, obviously, so our focus is generally around mobility, but it's not just cars, it's about other elements around transportation. So that requires us to understand this mobility landscape, that we'll call it. There's probably many more categories here that you could come up with yourself. This is simply just skimming the surface, really, on some of those important elements that you need to address in a conceptual design. So there's things like modularity, which engages with platform technology, and also explores some of the work that the disruptive agile companies are really pushing forwards on. There's this notion that cars and vehicles are less about having a vehicle to own forever and cherish it and polish it, although the alpha and various things we've discussed belie that. But for general customers, put it that way, we're now seeing mobility being offered as a service. That's pretty standard, and certainly that's going to be growing in the near and far term future. So this idea of mobility on demand is very interesting to people. It's very attractive to not have something sitting outside your driveway for 95% of the time doing absolutely nothing. Why do we need that? And therefore, do I need to even own a vehicle at all? Very critical points at the moment. Then we move around to the experience. So a lot of companies are moving and looking and researching around what is the experience of traveling beyond getting from A to B. And indeed, most users expect that, they demand it. They're not that interested in just the boring element of traveling from one point to another. They're getting used to having an experience, a social experience, whatever it is, on that journey. Again, possibly brought along by social media, mobility devices, etc., mobile devices. And then finally, infrastructure, that you need to understand, that if you propose or you come up with an idea that engages in some very rare technology or difficult to manage fuel system or something like that, that it needs its own level of credibility and viability to really move the project along. And of course, powertrain has huge package implications. That's something that we'll explore a little bit more in number 3 of these chats and exercises. But you need to understand what those package implications are before you kind of just say, yeah, it's going to be a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle or an EV 4-motor vehicle, etc., etc. So we need to kind of cast our net wide around the mobility landscape, amongst others. And the second stage really is going to be using that initial research around consumer trends and shifts in the uses of vehicles and ownership models, etc., to generate the basis for a concept brief. And we use, and this is what I'm sharing with you, this particular list to ask ourselves key questions around the initial concept, to effectively interrogate the idea. And we've got this little acronym, which Ford are the master of acronyms, as I'm sure Eric will confirm. But so this one is RISE, Relevance, Innovation, Solution, and Experience, or Experiential. And effectively, what we're looking at here, what we're focusing on for this part of the journey, is the R, the I, and the E. Why does this concept exist? What is the relevance of this concept? Innovation. What is new about your idea? Is there anything new? Is it the experience? Is it something tangible? And the experience. What is the experience that you're presenting to the customer? What is the design narrative, the story behind the concept? Really critical. So if we dig down a little bit, drill a little bit into what these categories mean. So in a bit more detail, if we go back to relevance, so effectively relevance looks at something that may be a trend or a movement that has impact on people now, and certainly something that might grow in the future as well. Generally, it has researchable background so that you can prove something might be important to a number of different people, a number of different target customers. Innovation asks the question as to whether the concept proposes any new ideas. And as I mentioned, it's why would anyone be interested in this? What is it actually offering people? And you could also apply that to people that you're pitching an idea to, rather than just the end customer, because effectively they are your customer to move a concept further down the development stage as well. And what you can do there is to base an idea around a long-term hunch or something that you think will happen if we extrapolate data in the future. And we'll get into that shortly. And then the experiential question really is focused around how that user interacts with the concept. Like I mentioned, what's that journey experience? Does it improve the user's well-being? Does it enable them to explore new places, hobbies, perhaps connect with friends or meet new friends, new people? Or is it about doing business more efficiently, etc., etc.? So there's a lot that you can pin onto that experiential question to interrogate your initial idea. That's a very strong one now, particularly at the moment. Okay, so let's just look at the approach in a little bit of detail and give you some examples of what we're talking about here, because at the moment this is quite sort of theoretical. So let's just quickly look at perhaps the traditional approach. So, excuse me. This is a very simplistic way of framing an OEM studio marketing and product planning approach. And typically what happens in a design studio, as most of you will know, is that the directive of what the vehicle is or could be comes from a combination of marketing departments and product planning. And they give a kind of spec or a brief to the design studio. And this obviously, it varies according to the company, who then go away and design quite often around an existing package using a number of carryover parts or assemblies. And it's, as we know, there's a huge number of constraints in that kind of production vehicle development process, less so obviously in concept cars. But effectively, this is the process that the company identifies opportunities, business opportunities through regions or within the portfolio as a business case. And that is what defines what the vehicle would be. And that has left us with, you know, cars that we know and love, but this traditional approach to mobility. Let's look at a slightly different way of doing things, and we're not going to look at a vehicle as such to explain a slightly different process. I'm going to call this the outward-facing approach rather than the internal approach, which leverages different departments within the company effectively. So this outward-facing approach is really around understanding external factors that inform a concept. It's defined by responding to a trend or a forecast, and it's really got a secondary aim, which is to try and shape future behavior by presenting something new, something really unexpected, something innovative, if you like. And that's what you need if you're going to create a new idea, a new segment, a really new concept, really get people to sit up and take notice of the idea itself. So let's put this into practice with an example, as I say, so we can walk through it. So let's take the idea of delivery vehicles. So we're talking about transportation, we're talking about logistics, and the movement of goods, etc. So if we break down a timescale into, let's call it current, and then we say 5 years from now, and then we look beyond that, let's say 10 years plus, maybe 8 years in the case of this example, as the future. And current is defined really by trends, which are large-scale changes in circumstances or fashion. The plus 5 years, the mid time frame here, is something we're going to refer to as a forecast, which is a sort of estimation or an extrapolation of events that aren't too wild, they're not too wacky, they're reasonable assumptions, put it that way. And then prediction, which is a longer time frame really, and is a stretchier idea. And that's a statement made about the future. It's not necessarily something that can be backed up with data. So it's really just a statement around what we think will happen if certain situations occur. So in the case of delivery vehicles, if we take a current trend now, it's based on a short-term observation. I can look out a window now and see, a DHL or a Hermes van doing exactly this. It's response to online shopping. It's a manned vehicle, and it's basically a vehicle that could be used for any other function. There's nothing specific about this one at all. And that's the case for 99% of delivery vehicles, even now, although there are movements afoot. Okay, if we then stretch that time frame to look at a forecast and to understand, okay, understanding what we know around this field with our research and insight that we will do, what's a reasonable forecast we can make here? And I think anyone would agree that there's nothing particularly stretchy about suggesting that in the next 5 years, we will have probably zero tailpipe emission manned delivery vehicles. We're going to get the EV from Arrival, Canoe, etc., who are on the cusp of being out there in broader society now. So that's not too much of a stretch to design and think about that as your design brief, put it that way. But if we want to actually create something new and move on from that kind of assumption of what we can imagine in the next 5 years, we perhaps have to go with something called a long-term hunch. Now, not particularly scientific explanation, but it uses elements of the technology of the landscape that are kind of around but not proven, have many other applications, but there have already been kind of initial kind of trials or tests to look at the application of this in this particular usage scenario, put it that way. So this would be taking the existing understanding of the delivery vehicle, which is a 2D approach, it travels along roads, and we now switch that to looking at this problem in 3D. If we could get somewhere as the crow flies, we could use any height of flight path needed to get somewhere as quickly as possible. Then we're going to increase the efficiency, we're going to reduce the cost, etc., etc. Obviously it's unmanned, so therefore there's another efficiency there, and suddenly the idea starts to become quite feasible and attractive in other ways beyond the design of the product and what it does for users. So those three elements here, trend, forecast, and prediction, are a really helpful framework when you have an idea that you're basing around something that exists now. Okay, just move that across, and it's a really helpful model to kind of map out possible scenarios around an initial concept idea. So trend, forecast, prediction, and the time frames can be whatever you want, but effectively, for instance, when we're looking at automotive projects, a facelift can take a year or two, mid-cycle refresh, and so something like a new model can be beyond that forecast period and from 5 years plus into the future as well. So that can change according to the industry that you're in. So a couple of other examples just to kind of cement what we're talking about here. Let's say you embark on some research around some social trends that give you some understanding of how people are behaving in certain societal conditions, okay? And what we find here is that you can pull out from a series of data quite clear statement that suggests that a lot of people are lonely and have a technological dependency. That's something that we have data for now. So research around data that exists now can feed something into a prediction of what might happen in the far-term future. So we take that same idea about loneliness and technological dependency, we extrapolate that to guide a project. And it effectively can be, you know, as straightforward as the description that says a vehicle can become an enabler of social interaction. We know that it's beyond A to B, but it can actually become the hub of community behavior. It can be a place where people gather to eat. It can be a place where people gather to listen to, I don't know, storytelling, or to watch films together. You know, you can take that one insight from a current trend, and with that extrapolation, create a strong idea that has a fundamental basis in today's fact. So that's one example, effectively, of taking that trend and then extrapolating it. Let's look at another example, slightly kind of stretchier idea, if you like, here. And this is from one of my students in Coventry. Here what we have is a very simple piece of data that says 1 in 3 people in the world cannot see the Milky Way because of light pollution. And that translates as roughly 70% of the world's population living within, you know, light emitting pollution, if you like. And that's what you could define as a trend. That is growing with industrialization and urbanization and megacities growing. So that is a trend that is continuing to grow. And if we extrapolate that into a prediction that becomes the basis of a concept, we could say, we could say that because of this ongoing growth in light pollution, the prediction, or the translation into the concept, is a vehicle that brings us closer to the stars. It's quite a simplistic terminology, but that is the result of taking that data, that trend, and extrapolating it into a concept. So we're looking at very sort of basic, fundamental A to B here. But that framework that you see up top can be very useful just to help categorize what you understand as a trend or data, and then stretch it into the far distance and say, well, if I address that with a vehicle, what would that conceptually be, and what would it be aiming to do? Problem, possible solution. Okay, so that's why this little kind of framework can be quite powerful in the right framework. What I'm going to do now is just to go through one other example, and this is a simple one that everyone, I'm pretty sure, is fully up to speed on, as you're all automotive in some way or another. But let's just talk around briefly the trend of electrification. So it's on the cusp of being a large-scale change in circumstances of fashion. Certainly is in certain countries where the uptake of EV is huge. Norway is the one that springs to mind at the moment. So let's just look at that in some detail and understand what we can predict from that current trend. Okay, so at the moment, electrification, you know, we know that compared to existing internal combustion engine cars, there are huge tangible benefits to electrification. There are also some drawbacks at the moment, one of which is weight, and that's partly because we're building around generally fairly conventional construction methods and componentry and assemblies that are previously or very similar to conventional ICE vehicles. However, if we take this idea of electrification and we look at what's state of the art, the cutting edge of that technology now, there are plenty of startups out there who are, because they're not legacy companies, they don't have huge numbers of plant and billions invested in production lines, etc., infrastructure. They're able to make huge transitional shifts towards much lighter and more modular and compact components that can really impact the design of the vehicle. They can be totally flexible, and you can just plonk on any body frame, any body shell you like, you know, and you have huge number of different functional vehicles. So we're looking at the agile innovators around that trend of electrification. And some of the kind of enablers here in terms of the innovations, if we go back to that RISE acronym about innovations, some of the enablers here, if we look at Canoe, for instance, Canoe are the first company, I think globally, although Infinity messed about with it, but to introduce true steer-by-wire, so no connect between steering column and steering rack. I think there are some legality issues there in terms of how that's applied globally, but that's a true enabler to allow huge numbers and true vehicle modularity around this EV platform. Another potential enabler is the in-wheel motor and potentially in-wheel suspension. Again, it's not really viable at the moment because of unsprung mass problems and, you know, implications for ride and handling, but it's on the cusp of becoming a thing. And if you look at perhaps what the cutting edge kind of skateboard at the moment might be, you might have other examples, but a company called RE at the moment, I think they're an Israeli company, have presented a number of different concepts around this specific kind of skateboard chassis, with every component shifted as far outboard as possible so that it doesn't impact on cabin package space. Everything's modular and everything's swappable. It's a fully scalable, stackable system here. So that's current state of the art. If you look at something that's perhaps a little bit more understood by us out there, which is Canoe, and understand what EV is enabling from their perspective, we've got the steer-by-wire, which I've mentioned. We've been able, with Canoe, we've been able to see the main components like the HVAC system, which is a huge system. In most cars, takes up, you know, the bottom of the center console in most cases. That's been shrunken to an extent, but shifted again where the internal combustion engine could be. So some real package opportunities opened up by this trend of electrification. Batteries contained within chassis profile, yeah, no great shakes, that's pretty understood at the moment. One thing that's potentially interesting is that it has enabled this idea of shifting components around, has enabled Canoe to use a transverse leaf spring. It's a carbon leaf spring, I understand, or composite. And again, that's not unique, but it does bring all of those components that intrude into cabin package away and under the vehicle. So that's what it's all about, effectively. And that push and extrapolation of what electrification can offer can be seen here, where we have the modular shared chassis and a large number of vehicles, potential vehicle segments and functions able to operate on that one shared skateboard chassis. I won't play that. And effectively, what that's doing, just to finish up this little segment here, what that's doing, what it's offering is a full circle back to the good old days of Model T and body on frame, which was the whole point about the agility of the production line. You know, and we've moved away from that now, generally, apart from various trucks, but effectively we've moved to monocoque for cost, rigidity, etc., and various reasons. But the current infrastructure is based on monocoque. This paradigm shift, this kind of hunch, this bucking the trend that the innovators, the agile companies are able to do at the moment, such as Canoe, is really going back to this and enabling what Ford Model T did all those years ago, which, you know, if you look at the brochures of the time, sorry for the history lesson, but it does have relevance. They had an enormous number of body styles and opportunities here. They had cargo vans, they had hospital vans, pickups, coupes, although that's a bit of a stretch to call that a coupe. But everything, because of this idea of body on frame, obviously now with the current technology that we have, you know, that enables a huge opportunity just to take that kind of extrapolation of the trend, if you like. Now, there was an animation here, it's not going to work. But, you know, everything from this, which is based, just sketched over a canoe platform, utilizing the steer-by-wire, to an SUV, to a pickup truck, to a cargo van, all on the same platform with elements that are adjustable. And that has been enabled by the EV powertrain and some of the technology around that that's enabled this whole new world, basically. And to come full circle, so what does it allow us to do? Well, you could say it allows us to return to fully bespoke, coach-built vehicles. And that is your design brief informed by a current trend. Okay, so another example where you take an existing trend, you stretch it, you see the technology that orbits around that at the moment, and you try and jump to what potentially you could offer people effectively, and that's around the innovation again. It's around the experience as well, because, you know, we think back to what Canoe can offer us, and you could say, well, yeah, it's fine for Canoe to have all of these you know, possibilities here. It's great for their product portfolio, but think about it from the customer, the end user, the target customer's perspective. And you've probably heard of these kind of concepts where, you know, you get a share in the chassis of the skateboard, and you pay a monthly fee for that. And then you can take it in and get a body style changeover in a matter of hours while you visit the store down the road. So you have a road trip package here, you have a passenger vehicle package here, you have the Canoe off-roader, which they brought out a few weeks back here as well. So those elements have a knock-on effect to the user experience, the journey experience, if you like, of using that vehicle as well. So all of those elements interlinked. Okay, let's move forward across here. Form the basis of what we're going to be doing over the next few days, really. And then I would like to share two projects in particular that are quite nice exemplars of using trend research and extrapolations of that trend research to inform a really strong initial part of the design concept or design brief. Okay, so the first task is built around looking through the megatrend material that is provided here on Bluescape, sorry, and to find from that material, to pull out 4 to 5, it could be more, key trends, forecasts or predictions that you consider form the basis of a strong concept. Now, they might be trends that you then extrapolate into a prediction, or they might be actual predictions made within those materials that you can take wholesale and say, well, this is definitely what's predicted. I'm piggybacking on top of that using this data to support it, and using that as the formation of my concept brief, my concept definition, if you like. The one really important point there is to focus not just on automotive, as I mentioned. It's really important to have this curiosity of looking outward. You know, I think Jay Mays said that he is not interested in employing a designer who sits in his room sketching all day. He wants people who've traveled, who've seen different cultures, who've immersed themselves in different situations, languages, whatever it is. And at the moment, of course, we're in unprecedented times for all sorts of different reasons. So, you know, the landscape that we're reflecting on and building off is really important to kind of get your own take on that, your own perspective on it, and embed that into the concept definition, the idea of what you want to build. So we need to look at cultural trends. We need to look at perhaps some mobility preferences post, I had to say it, sorry, COVID. You know, there are some interesting research elements out there that suggests that people are a little bit wary, understandably, of mass transit and mass transportation. And there are certain design responses to that as well. But also different powertrain ideas and autonomy. So these obviously are automotive, different ownership models of vehicles, and different understandings and ideas around sustainability, which is definitely an ongoing rolling trend in transportation. So that's what you need to kind of zoom out to look at. I've provided a number of different resources there for you. There are 4 studies which are really comprehensive. And again, from that, what I'd like you to do is to pull out 4 to 5 key trends or forecasts that you consider would form the basis of a really strong concept. And then what we'd like you to do is pull together a short visual presentation. This can be PowerPoint, PDF, or PSD file, 4 to 5 pages if you like, where you present the key trends and findings that you would like to highlight. And you need to produce any supporting statement or data as well that make justifications for the choices that you are presenting. And also some initial thoughts, some initial predictions around what the concept could be. Okay, and a note on that, that really that could be communicated as visually as possible. You know, it can just be text, but if you've got some infographics to bring to the party, or some initial kind of, you know, sketch ideas or simple proposals, that would be fantastic as well. So it's how you communicate those predictions and project definitions that we're interested in. Okay, I'm sorry I kind of spoke at length there. I hope it wasn't too long-winded there. Are there any sort of questions on what we talked about thus far before we go into a couple more examples?
That's pretty clear to me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. I think yeah, we'll talk afterwards and maybe come up with some ideas on how to share videos. You know, video components of the presentation. That's one of the weaknesses of Bluescape, I think. But we'll talk about that afterwards. But yeah, this is great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. And so what we've got here, there's 2 projects, and I'll show you perhaps this one in a bit more detail, which is a really nice exemplification of blurring mobility with living space. So this was a project I worked on with Jude Fan, Yicheng Fan, who's now senior interior designer for NIO. But at the time, this was sponsored in part by JLR as well. And they are they basically are very interested, JLR, in this third space, as they call it. So we've got our house, our dwelling, our residence, and our vehicle, and those are generally the 2 sort of large elements, large pieces of real estate that we own. And this third space examines, you know, this blurred area between the 2, between living and mobility. Is there a space? Is there an opportunity for a vehicle that, you know, translates the 2, that transitions in a unique way between living and moving? So they call that the third space, and they have a huge, well, a large research facility that really explores that in some depth. So this is the premise of the project here, living in the countryside. He's got 3 tenets, if you like, of the project. Architecture integration, and this is built around experience and experiential benefits for the customer, those who want to escape the concrete jungle. a better living experience, and you could certainly find trend data that supports those. Technology integration, an adaptable workspace with future technology, and tackling the idea of connectivity away from an urban environment. This one in particular is very relevant now in terms of our working from home, hybrid scenarios and how that might evolve in the future. And then finally, mobility integration, and that's built around experience, really. So visiting, the ability to visit incredible places using the mobility part of this concept. And this idea of freedom of choice, that people can travel around and choose their preferred neighborhoods to live in, which is a little bit of a kind of generalization, but it also underpins this idea of creating a great user experience and a great living experience as part of this concept. Okay, so this was the idea to create a product ecosystem, and it's the overlap between living, architecture, mobility, transportation, and the benefits that technology could offer within that overlap effectively. And that's how he presented that initial part of the research here. Then perhaps over here, this is relevance as well. So this is looking at the ownership opportunities or models given this type of idea. So the idea of a subscription-based countryside community. So we're talking rural, but with integrated services that this vehicle brings to give you a very, connected experience, even though you're miles away from anywhere. And also a sense of community, make friends, find sense of belongings, and just find the ideal place to raise your own family and to live and enjoy your life. So you're probably familiar with this kind of bell curve about early adopters and how people use technology. So he made a point to aim this, as most innovative projects do, at the early adopter phase, straight after the innovation and introduction of the new technology that enables it. So this is a little bit around personas, which we'll look at in more detail next time. But this is generating the story, the narrative that supports and informs the design that comes out of this. And then we start looking at some scenario and, if you like, basic storyboards. Again, something that we will look at in the next session. But looking at the idea of the vehicle physically connecting to the house. And this is, he's a talented guy, very emotive images of, sitting out in the sun, summer's evening, watching a film with family. There's some nice ideas at play here that were then developed further. Then moving across into the basic layout and how it all integrates together. And I'll just show you the rest of this. It's less relevant to the research side, but I would like you to see how it evolves, because we're creative, we're interested in this kind of automotive solution. Interesting connection with the idea of different phases of where you live. So you get this morning sun in the kitchen. And with this kind of proposal, he's suggesting that actually, it's very modular and the rooms can be interchangeable as well. So he was designing the living space and the vehicle that integrates into it. In terms of an experience and using the technology, the cutting edge technology, to heighten those experiences. So we're talking about using the use of projection mapping to, create perhaps an experiential space, and interactive lighting technology, so that it becomes an immersive experience in terms of your touch points, your haptic elements within the vehicle, and it brings people together through technology. That was one of the key themes here. And again, some other examples of that using his, his particular interest in his painting, etc. But perhaps an opportunity to create an immersive experience and add interactivity. But also, I mean, that's kind of expected on new concepts, new vehicles, new proposals. This idea, though, is strong around bringing people together and to give them something from traditional communities, perhaps, that we feel we've lost. Most people will say, what with social media and always being connected, I'm always online and I'm always talking to people, but my actual face-to-face contact and that community sense is not necessarily as strong as it was when my parents were the same age, for instance. I think that's perhaps a universal thought, particularly with COVID, and that's a whole new disruptor in that mix. So this idea of getting people together, in this case around the concept, and forging a sense of community around this brand effectively is really, really attractive to brands, obviously, but also very strong for people because they focus on this community aspect of that idea. And then some other ideas, just briefly, storyboard snapshots, effectively just showing, the fact that it doesn't feel like a vehicle within it. It's more about a lifestyle. You could be in a hotel, really, but you're actually on the roof of this vehicle. So it enables you to feel, to get away from it all, really, and to remove yourself from everyday life. Okay, and then we moved into the more creative elements of the project, which I'll run through anyway, because it'd be interesting to get your feedback on some of this work.
Sorry, Ed, how can I see what you're presenting again? My internet went off and I had to reconnect. Is there anything that I can click on?
Let me try this again. Oh, hold on a minute, that's screen sharing.
Oh, there you go.
Is that working?
Super, perfect. Thanks, Ed.
I don't know where that broke off, but I'll just carry on from here. And yeah, this is, so as I say, this is moving into the creative stages of the project, which this part of the course is not really focused on, but it's useful to see that extrapolation of an idea and how this person has developed it, because those ideas, stayed central to the concept all the way through. So these are the initial ideation sketches, using very clear product inspiration, but also architecture, because that's one of its main functions. Exploring different forms with some perhaps Japanese references to inform these square and modular elements of architecture. And then starting to explore how it could blend and link to a dwelling or a residence, and how you could, connect people through the vehicle. And these are really, nice sketches that that show the different ways, different levels as well of how people could connect. So not only, with a story floor here, 2 stories, 2 floors, but also within the vehicle. It doesn't all have to be linear. If you're trying to create a living and an interesting experience in a vehicle, it can actually be on the roof of the vehicle, and that removes you and takes you to a new experience of how you view things. These kind of images are quite powerful to link the outcome here. And then more depth into the interior componentry and the layout and the function of the interior, etc., etc. So I just thought I'd share this project, and you can look through this in your own time. It's a particularly strong one, I think, and really, creates something that's really fresh, a very good example of something bucking the trend, perhaps, and rather than just something that is an expectation of what we might imagine today. So I'll leave that one with you to look through, and I'm just going to quickly go through this for 5 minutes before maybe we can have a discussion or comment. So this is the same kind of level of work, really, but hopefully you can see that. Yeah, okay, urban escapism. So this, again, focused very heavily on the initial stages of the project, and they were particularly strong for this. So research informed this definition of the project, which was this huge increase in megacity population, and also societal bit of research, which was interesting, or cultural, that looked at nature deficit disorder, which I didn't know anything about, didn't even know that exists. But that's something that children suffer from by dint of being in front of a tablet or a laptop or a screen the whole time. And it's actually a disorder that means they suffer developmentally, and they have connection issues and communication issues with people as a result. So you put that element with the idea that more people are living in urban populations, although COVID is adjusting that now, along with this idea that people are interested in an elegant and a luxurious camping experience, and you come up with effectively the concept definition that is this. So let me just move across here. And again, these elements here that I'm showing at this point are things that we're going to be working on in the next session, really. We're asking you to do that real upfront piece of personal research so you can bring some ideas that we can then build upon in the next phase. So that initial research, though, brought about this concept of creating a vehicle that you can camp in, that becomes a real experience. It's not a sort of harsh camping vehicle, and it has interesting elements to the interior experience as well. So I'll just whiz through this so you can see it. You might have seen this on various forums, etc. It won the Magna design competition last year. And again, this very strong idea, similar to the other one, of moving people around a vehicle. You know, it's not all about being within a vehicle, within a space. It's about how people can interact with it, around it, outside it, on top of it, and use it as a hub for other activities. So that's the sort of connection, if you like, between those two projects. Again, you know, you pull an element off this vehicle and it becomes a social space, a seat, inspired by the original 2CV. But that's a really nice interpretation of using things around the vehicle. And excuse me, then on to the final design with its elements that pop out and create new spaces, new experiences for the occupants. Okay, and then the rest of that is the in-depth look at design. But all of these can link back to certain elements of the trend research that we looked at, essentially getting a family, you know, out, having a new experience in a vehicle. Okay. So I hope with that kind of introduction to the initial part of this through trends and forecasts, there's some food for thought in terms of how we can roadmap this initial part of the research journey. I would say that some people in design kind of find this side of the project a little bit dull and just want to get on and sketch, etc., etc. But in my own experience, talking to studios and OEMs, we have a lot of collaborative links with them in Coventry. The narrative of the design and the experience that you generate is becoming more and more important, particularly with things like autonomy, you know, around the corner. Brands really need to differentiate themselves in different ways. than traditionally. So this kind of focus on the experience, the innovative experience, if you like, is really important to future employers. So it's not as exciting as sketching in some respects, but it really underpins a really strong concept, and hence the focus today. So I've probably rattled on a long time there. I'm sorry for that. Hopefully it was interesting in some respects. Are there any questions?
This was a fantastic presentation. Thank you. This is exactly the kind of content I'm hoping to impart in this course. And as you said, the studios are becoming increasingly wanting of people that are not just great sketchers, but great thinkers and great problem solvers, and are able to operate with product planning and strategy people and guiding company strategy. And at Ford we have a complete team now. We have a completely new team called D Ford, which is fully dedicated to this type of work, and it requires a different skill set, and actually it actually opens up opportunities for people beyond the traditional fine arts skill set of just hot sketches and things like that. It's a very multidisciplinary environment, which includes people from psychology, humanities, anthropology, marketing, engineering, all working together. D Ford is a very multidisciplinary group with the ability to work with human-centered design methodologies. So it's definitely a much more collaborative way of working as well. So excellent presentation. And then I just wanted to add, I'll just make a little plug here, but this course is part of a series of courses we're running through the spring, which includes the next course, which will be on designing automotive interiors. After that, we're going to have a course on digital interface design, so in-vehicle digital interface design, and then following that with a portfolio and presentation course. The idea is that if you were to take multiple courses, you could whatever you generate in this course, you could progress through the following courses, through any of the following courses that you wish to take. So and really trying to structure these courses around areas of specific opportunity and demand in the industry. There's greater demand than ever for strategic design. There's greater demand than ever for interior design. Greater demand than ever for digital interface design. It's one of the hottest growing segments in automotive design. And so meanwhile we have all of these students graduating from the major schools with these traditional fine arts skills, which are still very much in demand, but there's so much competition, as you said, for that type of career path. And how do people differentiate themselves? How do people create that niche within the industry that gives them an edge, right? And that's really what these spring courses are about. This is about identifying those opportunities in the industry that are in greater demand with less supply, and helping you to maybe identify strengths in yourself and opportunities in yourself to maybe fill some of those opportunities. So yeah, thank you very much, Ed, for hosting this for us today.
I have a question for you, Ed, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So the resources you're providing, are they from a variety of different backgrounds? In other words, like psychological research or demographic research. Like, what sort of resources are you expecting us or hoping that we tap into for these to garner these conclusions about trends?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, within the presentation itself, there's a focus on a couple of elements of which there are reports around. So I would say what we're looking at is to understand, as I mentioned earlier, that the overall kind of mobility landscape. That's your kind of initial mental task, if you like, your checklist, to read around that, and then to look at these trends, which, okay, we've got trends that cover consumer sectors. So that's very much non-automotive. It's people's attitudes, if you like, towards electronic devices, wearable technology, that kind of thing. So you'll get a lot of let's say insight into people's attitudes to technology. So that's, for instance, covered in this report here, which is an extrapolation of 2030.
Okay.
Look further with Ford. Again, this is not sponsored by Ford, although it sounds like it. Ford really produce a fantastic series of global trends and attitudes, and they present that in a very infographic way, and that's this looking further link here. And that covers everything from societal thoughts about loneliness, particular sustainability, ecology, all the way through to mobility as well.
Excellent.
So that's a kind of broad brush approach.
Okay.
This one here is a link to, I think it's a Goldman Sachs report, which is very car specific, obviously, as you can see by its title, and it uses a short time frame, 5 years, or 2025, 4 years now, as a way of exploring data around that particular
Is that a video link, Ed, or is it a slide link?
Yeah, that's if you
earlier on, I couldn't get it to fire up.
Okay, because if I click it now, can you see that? You get a direct.
Yeah. Okay. So you launch it.
Let's have a look. If I open a new window, not sure if you are you seeing my?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it.
There we go. All right.
Okay. Are you seeing it on yours or mine?
Yeah.
I can't.
We are. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
and then
there's
the first box is just right. What's in that first box there?
Right, that first box is that Ford presentation with an X in it. For some reason, that is not.
Okay.
That's messed up. So I've just replaced that because I
great.
saw that wasn't working. There's another trend report that I've uploaded here. This is significant. It's many paged, okay, but it's very. It's a study around. Autonomy and our attitudes towards autonomy, people's fears particularly and concerns, and what design opportunities there are to address those. So that's quite a useful sort of psychological approach there. Okay, I'll just ditch this one. So
sorry, one question. That Ford stuff, is that a series of presentations which you can just download from the internet on various subjects?
Yeah, I've done that historically. They've done this for years. It's a PDF document typically that you can download. So I'm just wondering if you can actually, you should be able to open it directly through here.
Yeah.
And they also provide sample sizes, the location of the data, all sorts of very interesting information there. So again, there's going to be mobility trend data, there's going to be technology trend data, consumer data, across all the spectrums there. So that's really what I would like you to look at in terms of pulling out the key trends. Don't just focus on automotive, for sure. Okay.
Perfect. If there's any other resource or any other series of resources that you recommend, I would love to see a list of anything.
Yeah.
For sure.
Even for future research. Sorry, Andre.
Yeah, McKinsey is putting a lot of putting a lot of material online. So they are doing really great research, and they are putting everything on their rather website or if you're McKinsey. Yeah. So
in
if
fact,
you
those
follow them on
consultancies,
LinkedIn, you can see. Yeah.
Sorry, I keep getting your delay. I'll shut up for a minute. No, you finished. Okay, so also Deloitte and those places, a lot of those consultancies produce sort of economical or economy-focused reports around investment opportunities for future, effectively. So they're really good. I'll put together a list.
Yeah.
And I'll add it here.
Thank you.
Great.
No problem.
Awesome.
Great.
Good stuff.
Okay. Can we, Ed? Can we just talk a little bit about what each of us can expect in the one-on-one sessions? Like, how do you want to approach the first one-on-one sessions?
Sure. So I've given, I think, everyone apart from, I think there may be one confirmation I need about a 2 o'clock clash, but I'll talk to people separately about that through email. But effectively, I think what I'd like to do is to prepare this presentation, if you guys don't mind, for the next week's session, this Friday session. I think it's beneficial to, as a group, have that discussion, bounce some ideas around each other, and perhaps create some new thoughts, etc., etc. So for the one-on-ones, I'm very happy to talk to you a little bit about the career, your aspirations, as you've mentioned here, so I can understand a little bit better how to focus my feedback and guidance to help you, because I have to cover a lot of general areas here, but you've each got a very specific situation and perhaps a specific discipline as well that I can tailor my advice and guidance towards. So those one-to-ones, a little bit of kind of get to know you, and then a discussion around your findings so far, if you've got any issues, perhaps where to push the process so that you can create this presentation for the next Friday session. Okay?
All right, Ed, would it be beneficial for us to just send you a quick email about our aspirations and things like that, just so when we go into the call, we can make the most of the half an hour, just to...
Definitely.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, just so you're kind of aware.
Nice one. Yeah, even if that's just bullet points, that's fine.
Yeah.
But a little kind of, this is what I want to get out of the course, or what I want to do, would be really helpful.
Sure, understandable.
Okay. Excellent.
I have to leave the meeting. I have to tend to my children at this point. They are being homeschooled again for the week because of a quarantine issue. There was the child that was found COVID positive in their class yesterday. So unfortunately, I have to leave the session.
I think we're pretty much.
Thank you very much.
I think we're pretty much ready to wrap up in the next few minutes here. I actually have a hard stop in a couple of minutes. I have a meeting to attend. So, yeah, very very good. I'm really happy with this first go. Hopefully, we'll work through some of the tech issues. Yeah, Luke, if you're continuing to have connection issues, I just emailed you the link to Bluescape's customer support. So.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Eric.
Yeah,
what I'm going to do is, hopefully, I'm going to try and work from my in-laws' house next Friday. They have a slightly better internet connection and less traffic.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
that should probably help. I think a lot of it's just been down to the connection.
Okay.
The kids watching Netflix.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. Okay. And by the way, under the
Just
project,
a quick question.
Yeah.
Are we on week 0 now? And then we're gonna follow next 3 weeks. Or it's week 1, and then next Friday is week 2, and then
Yeah, I think this
after
is
that
one.
week 3.
I think it's one.
Yeah, this is one.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, but yeah, you'll.
So
we'll
how many
have,
one-on-ones we gonna have?
3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first one next Wednesday, and then 2 following.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
Just really quick,
So-
under project examples too those are the 2 demo projects I did for the previous gravity sketch course. I'm not going to take you through them right now, but you can have a look at those on your own. I finally got everything together for a final presentation. So yeah, please feel free to have a look at those.
That's great. Sorry, I forgot time-wise. I guess if you if you can send me that kind of statement or a bit of background and that information directly here, in case I think most of you have it, but there it is anyway, and that would be very helpful as well. And I will post a resource list this evening for you as well.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, nice to meet you guys. and look forward to seeing your efforts and seeing you in the first one-to-one.
Very excited. Thank you.
Thank you
That's
very
great.
much.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks.
Cheers, guys.
Nice weekend.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
later.
Cheers. Yep.
All right, take care.
Bye.